Thank you, Mr Speaker. It's always a challenge and a great pleasure to follow the member for Mermaid Beach. And I've got to say that after listening to the last 4 minutes of that very erudite, in-depth and well-resourced and investigated contribution, that there has been a heck of a lot of talk about members but not a lot of action. So it is always interesting to hear his contribution on things of technology. And Mr Deputy Speaker, I guess you also raised the issue of the changes in technology and what had occurred, as has the member for Chatsworth, in relation to what you might euphemistically say were the good old days, in the days when someone had to actually get a camera out, load film into it, take a snap, and of course was restrained very much by the fact, unless they were a photographer or a home expert, taking the shots down to the chemist or down to the local film processing place and actually getting something published, and getting down there and doing it. That sort of restraint isn't in place these days. Obviously, with the speed at which photos are taken and distributed around people's social networks and those sorts of things. So the world has indeed changed, for the better in the vast majority of cases, but these changes need a response as well, and a response to those circumstances and to technology. So here today we've got a short bill that has led to a very lengthy debate, and I think that indicates the importance that those in this place on this legislation and on protection of the community, and that is a good thing. Much has been said about this bill over the last 2 days, and I've had an opportunity to look at some of the contributions that have been made by members here and in support of the compelling cases for this bill. So we have the members for Nindri, Nicklin and McAllister, who all referred to their experience in the Queensland Police Service, and all of them provided good and thorough, if you like, cases of their experiences, of the frustrations they felt in many cases with not being able to prosecute people, to deal with charges, particularly those charges relating to children, recognising that children and young adults perhaps act more impetuously and with less consideration than those of us who have been around a little longer. Having said that, there are some of us who have been around a little longer who have been caught in photographs that they wish they weren't in as well, and I can say from some experience that I have been in some of those. Not of the nature of those contemplated by this bill, let me make that abundantly clear, Mr Speaker, and to members of the House. And I would, it would be horrendous for anyone to receive a photo like that in any event as well. So that would be the case. But I think it is important to reflect on that contribution made by those members and their experiences on it. Reflect on the contribution of the member for Mansfield as a teacher. And I can remember some years ago, while visiting a number of my schools, that the principal of one of the private schools in my electorate, when I was talking to her about the issues that she was confronting, this is probably going back 7 or 8 years or so now, said to me, "Tim, the biggest issue we are confronting at the moment is the issue of cyberbullying amongst kids who have got phones. Not just the transmission of sexually explicit photographs, although that's a part of it, but the whole gamut of actions. And as we know, kids, girls and boys can be incredibly cruel, not realising perhaps how cruel they can be, but sometimes very much aware of what they're doing and go so. And so we've seen this come through. So with all of the benefits of technology, then there are the responses needed to what it brings with us. So that was listening. I read the member for Gavin speech. She claimed to perhaps be one of the few people in this place who grew up with technology and went to high school with technology, and she referred to MySpace. I reckon if I asked my 16-year-old daughter what MySpace was, she'd say, "I've got no idea. How long ago did that fly out to the end of the universe?" and those sort of things. You talk to your kids. I've got, Mr Deputy Speaker, as you know, 3, 18, 19 and 16. And Facebook is old news to them. They don't want anything to do with it, and they're elsewhere. So I say to the member for Gavin, it doesn't take long in this place for time to catch up with you and sometimes pass you by. And I obviously read the member for McConnell's comments in relation to her daughter Ali, who I think I have met at an event somewhere, and bring it to her. I was, of course, struck by the comments made by the member for Miller. the member for Miller, the Minister for Transport and Main Roads, and he, I consider with some considerable expertise, said this: technology is amoral. It can be used appropriately and well, and of course it can be used unethically and maliciously to cause great damage and distress to others. And I thought, yes, the member for Miller there speaks the voice of experience. And he went on to say, today we live in a hyper-connected world. Today's technology provides us with broad opportunities to communicate and create. However, with those opportunities come great responsibilities. The member for Miller. The responsibility to record your emails, to maintain them in accordance with the requirements of the Public Records Act, not to communicate in contravention of the Premier's directions to only use your private emails. So I thought, well, you know, the member for Miller has finally recognised and seen the light and come through. An interesting contribution from the member from Miller. It is very serious indeed. It is very serious indeed, and I've indicated the seriousness of it, as it was serious indeed for the member for Miller to maintain proper records of his communications with organisations, particularly those ones. Mr Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy
Member for Clayfield, there's a point of order.
Mr Deputy Speaker, the member's had his fun. The fact is that it's not relevant to the bill and it should be brought back to the bill.
Thank you, Leader of the House. Member for Clayfield, if you could guide your dissertation back to the
I was indeed swerving back to the right. I was indeed swerving back to the right lane, Mr Deputy Speaker. I was just responding to the interjection from the member from McConnell, Mr Deputy Speaker. If it hadn't have been raised, I wouldn't have been able to speak about it. But nonetheless, and I responded appropriately.
Members, please. The member for Clayfield has the call. Please stop the discussion across the chamber. Thank you.
So, Mr Deputy Speaker, as I was saying, the matter is a serious matter, and today we see so many opportunities for others to act in ways that offend, shock, hurt, humiliate and harm. Mr Deputy Speaker, those ways and those attempts are not just limited, although inevitably they have the greatest effect, on those who are less able to deal with it or who have inadvertently shared or have been caught out in a situation I think the Deputy Premier described as a power situation, someone exerting power over someone else, particularly women. But it also happens to some of the most powerful and richest people in the world. And we've only seen in the last 48 hours how Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, a man worth billions of dollars, has been supposedly, allegedly, according to him, almost blackmailed by the publishers of the National Enquirer, leading to that somewhat spectacular headline that ran in the New York Post, which said, I think it was, Bezos exposes Pecker, because Pecker is the editor of the National Enquirer. So it happens around the world, and it's happening everywhere now. So I think it is important to recognise that's the case. In my own case, I have experienced similar issues with one of my children who received extraordinarily threatening and upsetting pictures sent to them, and with demands that pictures be sent back to the person who sent them to them. The police did investigate, finally found someone hiding behind a Facebook page, an adult, who was using those services and the connections that kids make at school and through friendships to try and confront, to get, effectively sexually explicit pictures from a 13-year-old. Incredibly distressing. The police did a fantastic job, and I want to acknowledge that, in taking action immediately. But we know it's out there, and we know there are unscrupulous people out there. Mr Deputy Speaker, so obviously this legislation will get the support of the House. Obviously we want to see it work. Obviously it will need to update as technology updates. No one is disputing those things. There are issues around consent and those sorts of things. They will be dealt with. Importantly, over and above the legislation, as important as it is, as important as the penalties are, as important as it is that the police have the powers and the courts have the powers, is also the importance of education. Again, my wife and I have attended a number of school briefings about what goes on. Went to one where the expert giving the story or providing the training did a scan of all the kids, a school of 1,500 people the day before she turned up. It is amazing what you don't know what your own kids have got out there on the net. It is shocking. The way they talk to each other is eye-opening. The way they can behave thinking that it's secure communication, and the way that we might have thought it was secure communication talking to a mate or a friend somewhere else, they do over the internet. We've got to bring that education up to speed. Many schools do it. The system does it. This is one part of it. Education and parents' responsibility has got to be the other part of it.
Thank you, Member for Clayfield. I now call the member for Mudgeeraba.
Thank you, Mr Deputy